How's it going, everyone? It's Hobby for the Swan Job. Today is April 24, 2021, and today we're going to forecast the amount of tornadoes we will receive for 2021 and which areas will receive more than average amount of tornadoes or a less than average amount of tornadoes. But before I begin, make sure to subscribe if you want to see more weather econs. Make sure to like if you like this video, and make sure to turn on post notifications if you want to see even more weather econs. So, like the title suggests, this will be a complete outlook of the 2021 tornado season to see how many tornadoes your specific location could receive or specific region. So let's begin by first taking a look at the Oceanic Nino index, or the sea surface temperature anomalies in the Eastern Pacific, right around the equatorial Pacific. And you see that in the Nino 3.4 region, especially the region typically used to determine whether or not we're in a La Nina or an El Nino, you see that the sea surface temperatures have been well below average for several months now, pretty much starting right around May of 2020, and now we're pretty much almost in May 2021. So it's pretty much been a year we've been in well below average sea surface temperatures, and as a result, we've experienced a La Nina pattern for the past several months, even peaking right around November, October, which is why we saw such an active hurricane season last year. But you might be asking, what does a La Nina have to do with a tornado season? While a La Nina isn't as correlated to a high tornado season as you might expect, it's still very important to at least identify the tornado season and see where it or how many tornadoes will occur in a certain region in the United States. So taking a look, you obviously see we've been in a La Nina for a long time, but we have seen a rebound in sea surface temperatures in the Nino 3.4 region in the equatorial Pacific, which is very important to point out because that definitely could change the outcome of the tornado season for a lot of 2021 going forward. But let me show you guys the typical amount of tornadoes are received in a specific location during an El Nino or a La Nina phase, and we'll clearly see the difference in the occurrences of tornadoes in certain locations, such as right around Arkansas, Oklahoma, Texas, and Mississippi. You do see that during the La Nina influence, we see much more tornadoes, more frequent tornadoes throughout this region, and especially a lot of the East Coast as well is more likely to receive tornadoes. And I think it's as a result of the La Nina having a more defined jet stream dip and typically bringing more moist conditions right around the Ohio River Valley. So as a result, there's obviously more thunderstorm activity for a tornado threat to occur. So as a result, tornadoes are more frequent during a La Nina, but it's a complete opposite during an El Nino, where you see that for most of the United States, tornadoes are less frequent overall. And I think it's as a result of pretty much the polar jet stream being well up north of the United States. So the jet stream doesn't dip down far south enough to create an unstable environment for a lot of the United States, to create at least an environment that's unstable enough to promote just very strong lift and updraft and wind shear to create a lot more tornadoes throughout the United States. So as a result, during a La Nina, tornadoes are far more likely to occur, or they're at least far more frequent throughout the United States, besides maybe areas such as the southern United States, where areas of Florida and a lot of the Gulf Coast, the extreme Gulf Coast states, and as well as a lot of the Southwest United States does receive less than typical tornadoes. And I think it's primarily due to the overall more drier conditions in the southern United States during a La Nina. So we do see less thunderstorm activity in those areas to promote a lot of tornado activity. But you see that during La Nina influence, tornadoes are more frequently to occur right around Arkansas. And since we've been in a La Nina for quite some time, we should probably expect more tornadoes, I'd say right around Arkansas and northern Mississippi and Alabama, which is exactly what we've been seeing, especially in March, because if you recall those two past tornado outbreaks starting March 17th and March 25th, which I think were some of the worst tornado outbreaks in March history. The majority of the tornadoes were occurring right around northern Mississippi and Alabama, and the highest risk of tornadoes was right around that region. So it really shows that the La Nina could really influence the location of and the frequency of tornadoes within a certain area, which is very important to identify and to process when making the tornado forecast for this year. So, and since we've already have been experiencing more than average tornadoes right around this region, it really pretty much gives more evidence that we're going to see more frequent tornadoes in this region, which is something I definitely made sure to process when making my tornado forecast for this year, because it really gives a good idea, because it's really very good evidence of just high tornado frequency in this area. However, I will point out, obviously, the elephant in the room is that we're more likely to get into a neutral season eventually as a result of the rising sea surface temperatures right around the Nino 3.4 region. And while that is true, it does take some time for the atmosphere and the jet stream to react to sea surface temperatures changes. Like the atmosphere or the jet stream orientation doesn't just change overnight. It takes several weeks to even months for the sea surface for the jet stream to react to the change in sea surface temperatures in the Pacific. So as a result, I do think the effects of a La Nina will still be there headed into later during the summer and into late spring. So I do still believe that the frequency of tornadoes will still be the highest right around this region, despite us going eventually into a neutral pattern, which is most likely to occur this summer, based off of the CPC forecast, where we do see the highest risk of, we do see the highest chance of a neutral forecast. But I also want to point out that later during the year, we do see a rebound in the chance of a La Nina. So as a result of that, I do think that for most of the year, we will experience sort of La Nina type conditions when it comes to the tornado season. So I do think tornadoes will be more frequent right around Arkansas, and a lot of this region in general. But that's not the only factor we need to determine when making a tornado season forecast, because while a La Nina influence certainly means that most of the United States will experience more than typical bigger amount of tornadoes than usual, we also need to keep track of the sea surface temperatures throughout the Atlantic, especially because what a higher than usual sea surface temperatures does, especially in the Gulf Coast, is that it really promotes a lot of lift in the atmosphere right around the Gulf of Mexico. Since the air temperature is warmer, the air molecules are more bound to move a lot more, and that creates a lot more space for for the atmosphere to absorb more water vapor. And that water vapor is important when because during the process of evaporation and eventually condensation, the atmosphere releases a lot of latent heat, which is very important in creating a very unstable air mass, and it really does drive a lot of just convection and instability when we see just a lot of when we see sea surface temperatures warmer than average, as the atmosphere requires less energy to absorb water, water. So we do see an increase of thunderstorm activity throughout the Gulf of Mexico when the sea surface temperatures are warmer. And as of right now, you see that the sea surface temperatures throughout the Gulf of Mexico are warmer than average. And you might be pointing out that in the eastern Gulf of Mexico, as well as just off the coast of the Carolinas, we do see cooler than average sea surface temperatures. And while you are right, but I do think that will eventually change, because like I said in my hurricane season forecast just yesterday, I do expect the sea surface temperatures to rise all throughout the Atlantic, which will promote more thunderstorm activity overall, and it's also going to increase the chance of hurricanes, and hurricanes are prone to produce tornadoes, which is also another thing I wanted to include in my forecast, because the occurrences of hurricanes along the United States coast can make a big impact in how many tornadoes you experience, because tornadoes are bound to produce many tornadoes as a result of just strong wind shear associated with hurricanes. So as a result, I definitely do think that the amount of tornadoes, especially along the Gulf Coast and along the ocean coast in general, will increase as a result of higher sea surface temperatures. Because if we were to take a look at my summer outlook for 2021, pretty much the entire United States is expected to be well above average when it comes to temperatures, and that will result in the sea surface temperatures eventually rising to the point where it's going to be well above average for the summer, and that will produce more thunderstorm activity throughout the southeast and more lift in the atmosphere, more convection overall, and also more hurricanes, which will induce more tornadoes throughout the United States. So as a result, it's another reason why I do expect it to be more active than usual, especially in the eastern half of the United States, more specifically just east of the Mississippi River Valley. So we definitely need to keep that in mind. We're going to see a La Nina. We're going to be experiencing La Nina type pattern in the eastern half of the United States, which will promote more tornadoes in certain locations in the eastern half, as well as higher sea surface temperatures in the Atlantic, which will induce more thunderstorm activity and enhance convection and lift in the atmosphere to create just very potent tornadoes and to make tornadoes a lot more frequent throughout the eastern half of the United States. However, those are not the only two things I want those aren't the only two reasons why I do believe that those aren't the only two factors I did to create a tornado season forecast. Another thing we also need to keep in mind is the drought monitor, and the reason why I decided to use a drought map for the United States currently is because it really gives a good idea of the frequency of thunderstorms you could experience in a certain area. Because obviously, if you're in a drought-stricken region, it's far less likely you're going to experience thunderstorms, and thus you're far more likely to experience tornadoes. And you might point out, while most of the western United States is under more drier than typical conditions, which is an area that doesn't typically experience tornadoes at all. You need to also keep in mind that throughout Texas, they're experiencing much drier than average conditions, which is a big part of Tornado Alley, I should say, where tornadoes are very frequent in Texas at times. And since a lot of Texas is currently under a drought at this point, it's less likely we're going to see thunderstorm activities. And like I said in my previous videos, droughts don't go away overnight. It takes a lot of time for droughts to go away. It doesn't just you can't be in a drought one day and then next day you're completely free of a drought, because droughts do take a long time to completely go away, mainly because it's just an endless cycle where, since there's less moisture along the surface as a result of the drought, there's less water the atmosphere could absorb and evaporate and create condensation to allow to create thunderstorm or rain activity, and that creates pretty much an endless cycle where it's just very hard to get out of a drought. And since we're going to be in the neutral phase, which promotes more drier than average conditions throughout the western half of the United States and including Texas, we're less likely to get out of a drought anytime soon, and that will decrease the chance of thunderstorm activity throughout Texas, and I'd say a lot of the Midwest as well, because one of the main sources of water vapor that the Midwest one of the main sources the Midwest absorbs for water vapor is the Gulf of Mexico, just off the Texas coast. And when we're seeing Texas currently in a drought and under very stable conditions, that makes it less likely for the lower level moisture. That makes lower level moisture transport less likely into the Midwest. So as a result, while I do expect less thunderstorm and tornado activity throughout the Midwest, and you might be thinking, well, Kansas and Missouri aren't in a drought currently. Why are you expecting less tornadoes and thunderstorm activities in those regions? And like I said before, a lot of the moisture that Kansas and Missouri obtains is from the Gulf of Mexico, and when the lower level moisture flow isn't there along Texas as a result of a drought, that makes it less likely that Kansas and Missouri will experience a lot more thunderstorm or tornado activity. So as a result, I do mainly expect above average tornadoes. I'd say more just east of the Mississippi River Valley as a result of this drought that's pretty much striking a lot of the western United States at this point. So I do expect more tornadoes to occur in the eastern half of the United States. Now, in terms of my tornado forecast for each region in the United States, you see that I'm expecting well above average tornado risk right around this region. Of course, because we're in a La Nina, and this is a region that typically gets the most tornadoes during a La Nina, and it's also supported by the fact that we've already experienced just a lot of tornadoes in Alabama and Mississippi this year already. So that pretty much supports my idea that we're going to experience more, especially since we haven't even hit the peak of the tornado season in a lot of areas in the United States. And I do expect above average tornado risk even just north of that, because like I said, sea surface temperatures will be above average, and typically during a La Nina, we do see above average tornado risk conditions throughout the eastern half of the United States, just east of the Mississippi River Valley, and the increased amount of thunderstorms as a result of higher sea surface temperatures and hurricanes will increase a chance of tornado risk all throughout the eastern half of the United States. And I do expect it to be slightly less right around Florida, Georgia, and the Carolinas, mainly because we are still going to experience La Nina type conditions, and further southward it is a little drier than usual during a La Nina, but I do expect the increased amount of moisture as a result of higher sea surface temperatures and the increased amount of hurricanes to more than make up for the drier than average conditions the La Nina would typically bring. And you see that pretty much just west of the Mississippi River Valley, I do expect below average tornado risk for a lot of the Great Plains and the Midwest. Mainly because they are experiencing a drought, and the stable than average conditions throughout Texas will limit the amount of tornadoes overall for the Midwest, since that lower level moisture transport will not be there for a lot of this year as a result of that drought. So in terms of the amount of tornadoes I expect for this year, so the average amount of tornadoes the United States typically experiences is around 1,383 tornadoes. My forecast amount is pretty much right around average, because while I do expect more than average tornadoes, more frequent tornadoes throughout the eastern half of the United States, I think it will be somewhat slowed down by the less than frequent tornado occurrences in the right around the Midwest, because the Midwest is known to get a lot of tornadoes, and when we don't get a lot of tornadoes in the Midwest, it really makes it hard for the eastern half of the United States to make up for the fact that the Midwest will experience less than average amount of tornadoes for this year. So as a result, I do expect the amount of tornadoes to mainly be average for this time of the year. But remember, all it takes is just one tornado to completely devastate a community. Like I said with my hurricane forecast, even whether the tornado season is more active than usual, less active than usual, or around average, remember, all it takes is just one to completely devastate a community. And I want you guys to know that, to be aware of that, and remember that even if you're in a below average risk location when it comes to tornadoes for this year, it's still certainly possible you will experience a tornado this year. So just stay aware of that, and stay tuned for your local forecast, and make sure to stay alert for those tornado warnings because it could impact anybody. But anyways, guys, thank you guys for watching. Make sure to subscribe if you want to see more weather content. Make sure to like if you like this video. Make sure to turn on post notifications if you want to see even more weather content. And I hope you guys have a good day.